his ending, Samson was on, he was on the cross in
Yes.
his ending.
Yes.
It is exactly like Jesus' story. He got sold for a bag of silver. Ends up to be
That's
given
actually
over.
interesting.
Just forgive it all. Just keep going. But right when I get to that column,
You'll see God's wrath.
yeah,
Exactly. And it wasn't about the revenge he was seeking personally against the Philistines. He understood that the Philistines, God had an issue because of their bad behaviors and their bad practices, and because they were adoring the devil. Wow.
this was somewhat of a punishment for his own disobedience. This was Samson taking accountability through his blindness, and when he went to go see God again, he knew that God was his full
We're going to start. Welcome to the Ethic Skill Podcast. It's me and Kevin, as you know, the dynamic duo. Here today, we're going to be talking about the story of Samson and Delilah from the Bible. What did we learn from Samson and Delilah? And also, uh, what can we apply from the experience that Samson and Delilah left for us as a blueprint of what to do and what not to do. So, Kevin, what are your thoughts about that Samson and Delilah story?
So, for Samson and Delilah, what did I learn from him? I learned a lot. God chooses God chooses people that aren't perfect, And Samson wasn't perfect, but he was anointed. And being anointed by God is there's pressure on there to do always the right things, right? And when I think of somebody that's anointed by God, I think of somebody that was perfect. But again, as we're seeing these Bible stories, a lot of the characters are not that. There's pieces of brokenness in them, and what gets me to approach the faith. Like I think I have to approach
Hmm.
the faith when I'm perfect. I think I have to approach the faith when I am weak, or not when I'm strong, and not when I'm feeling weak. And I think Samson, he opened up the door for me to really approach the faith, even when I'm not feeling the strongest. Like even Samson's the strongest character in the Bible, right?
The muscles, man.
Yeah, right. He was sent as the judge for the Philistines. He was definitely one of those big characters that was really strong, but he wasn't perfect. And there are signs. There's a lot that goes into Samson's story, but
Mm,
that was like my little takeaway
mm.
from Samson.
You know something? I have to agree with you on that, Kevin, because God chooses us to realize that our imperfections, we're still loved by God, and it's true what you're saying. Like he's not looking for, okay, you have to be merely perfect. No, it's like God loves you in your imperfections, but like you said something so critical. Samson was anointed. So Samson was chosen by God for a purpose bigger than himself. If you really
Yeah.
think about it, if you go through the story, it starts with his mother not being able to conceive a child, and then an angel appears to her, I'm sorry, and says, make sure you separate yourself and you do certain things because your son is going to be it has been chosen for the Lord. When you read that, what were you like? What's going on?
Yeah, right. Like at first you can't give a child at all, and you can't have one. But then when an angel comes in and says, "Now you're gonna have a child, and your son will be him, right? And he's gonna be a Nazareth.
Hmm.
He's gonna live by not touching no dead carcasses. He can't cut his hair, and cutting his hair, that's a big one. So just remember that one, cutting the hair. He can't do anything that's unholy. So he has to do everything that is holy for it. Because if he does anything that's unholy, then the Nazareth belief that's in them, the Nazareth traditions, principles that they all have gets kind of like wiped away. And
Mm,
we'll see that later on in Samson's story.
definitely, and being chosen for, just think about like the mother, receiving that news from the angel of God and accepting the fact that not only you're going to conceive a child that you wanted so much, but now your child is chosen for God. That must have been very invigorating for her.
Yeah, like just that feeling of like, oh, why? It's also like, why my child was just chosen for God, right? But then it's like she asked for a child to be conceived because she wasn't getting anyone that was conceived, and she kind of knew off the bat of what the angel was telling her. Like she was saying that Samson was gonna be like he's gonna face these trials when he gets older. He's gonna be like the judge, the hammer for God.
God. Yeah, that's a good point. Revealing the prophecy of his own son. It's like I can just imagine if like the angel of God came to me today and said, "You're like, will tell me the future of my kid," and then tell me that they were chosen for that. Like, how would I assimilate that information? Obviously, ke- perhaps I will feel a little prideful, and that my son has been chosen by God, but at the same time, knowing that your child's going to go to trial and tribulations must be a little nerve wracking too, and
Yeah.
worrisome.
Yeah, because it's not only just a trial, right? It's the trial of being kind of like a hero in a sense. And heroes they don't go through easy things. There's risk. There's been not big, not little risk. There's huge, big risk. Your life's in the hands of now this child. Now this child's life has a whole bunch of other people's hands in his life, right? So he just imagine even like raising Samson, like trying to keep him up to the Nazareth way, telling him like, "Hey, you are anointed by God. You have to stick to these principles, or your anointing, like your anointedness, is
Mhm.
gonna go south, or
Yeah, and you have a good point there because like we talk about Samson and Delilah, the story is pretty intricate, but we don't think about the mother. Like the mother, like we have to start there, and that's where we're starting with the mom, just to understand what she had to face when she took, also trusting God, through the process. Because as you can, as a mother, or as a parent, I'm pretty sure his mother kind of saw the faultiness of Samson in his development, and I'm pretty sure she was concerned, like she's not obeying God, or he's not obeying God. I'm sorry. And can you just imagine, like, also conserving him for the Lord, like all the things she had to do in order to make sure that he will follow those Nazareth ways to conserve his. Later on, we'll know he has like this superhuman strength.
yes, yes. That must be like such a challenge for her because even now, just getting like a kid to do something, right? That takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, energy into it. Like discipline is hard, and discipline in the Nazareth way is also that's also a hard one too. Like
Yeah.
there were so many rules that they had to
Well, he
follow.
couldn't drink alcohol either, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No,
No,
anything fermented.
fermented. Yes,
Yeah.
nothing fermented. That's correct. So think about that. He had to follow all these rules from a very young age. Uh, Perhaps, do you think this could have opened a little bit of that Samson to have that? Because for what I understand, he was obedient, following those steps, but then he had other vanities, such as like women.
Yes, yes. Like Samson's, that's one of Samson's weakness. Like I think that's what drove me to talk about Samson today as well to from choosing him. It talks about like he had the strongest character in the Bible, but his biggest struggle and what destroyed him was the sin of lust. And that was the biggest destroyer of Samson. Um And we'll talk about it more later on within
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
But we're giving you guys like little
yeah, yeah,
cookie to like drop
yeah.
something.
Easter eggs.
Yes, yes.
But it's interesting because like when when Samson is growing up, you got to remember like there was a lot of tensions with the Israelites, the their enemies.
Mhm.
Like whenever they would cultivate their crops, they would come and steal them, even burn them. They would do all these atrocities to the Israelites, and at that time God didn't have any prophets, so he had judges to come and save them. But a lot of time has passed for Samson to come in, and people have forgotten about God. You know, a lot of them were, you know, unfortunately, praying to other gods like Baal at that time, and God has put himself to the side until he heard the pain and lamentation from his people. And Samson comes into the picture, and as he's growing up, he's probably also seeing these atrocities happening. What do you think went through his mind to see like his people was being forced into almost a slavery?
Yeah, there's some kind of like not vengeance, but a hurt, right? It's like hurt seeing your people brought into slavery, having all like being tormented by the Philistines. Like that's what the Israelites were basically going through, the torment of Philistines, and and Samson was there to redeem them.
Yeah,
Like,
redeem, or I guess like Samson was supposed to honor God
yeah,
through facing his enemy.
yeah, and like I think it's like a little redemption in a way because it is like it is the honoring, but it's redeeming all the past dones and making new ways forward. Right? Like there's a point in the story where Samson falls in love with the Philistine woman and he asks his parents to go and get her as a bride. Because the tradition back then was you ask the parents to go and find and get the bride for you. But they were always wondering like why is Samson going for a Philistine woman as a bride? Right? So and that was God's way of reconnecting those two, the Philistines and the Israelites. Make that was a way of making like a peace treaty,
Mm.
in a sense. So that piece goes on, and it's during the wedding night where something happens, and it's through a riddle that Samson experienced. That kind of like brought him down. That kind of brought like a lot of rage towards the Philistines. So like there must have been some kind of peace.
Mm.
Like must have been like not peace, but must have been some kind of like, oh, the Philistines are doing terrible things to my people, but he's not seeking revenge.
Do you think that was a trigger point when his wife gets killed by the Philistines?
I think that was a trigger point for Samson, 100%, because it it feels there was a trust in the game that they were playing, but there was a cheat in that game where the Philistines cheated by saying they're going to kill his wife, and then his wife kind of like flipped the cards on Samson and lost kind of his trust onto it because she gave the answers over to the Philistines, and he knew that none of that was going to work up. And I think that like that was actually like God's first warning to Samson
Mm.
because
That's a good point of view.
the way that he got his riddle was when he killed the lion.
Lion, yes,
Yeah.
and
And he ate the
the
fermented honey from the lion's gut. So he did two of the things that
he
the
wasn't.
Nazareths weren't supposed to do. Yeah.
And that's a good point, Kevin, because he's not supposed to do that. And then the riddle was, what was the sweetest thing he ever ate, right? And he talks about how he journeyed through that and broke some of God's rules that he was supposed to maintain. And it's interesting because this story, believe it or not, it's not only about strength, but it's a lot about betrayal and disobedience. And
Mhm.
what does that transform into your life? How does disobedience to God hurt your life? What does it do to you? And I like what you just said, like going out to kill the lion, to eat something fermented as he's not supposed to.
And touch the deceased body.
Yes, that's another thing. He wasn't supposed to touch any dead bodies. So he's breaking several laws, almost like he's trying to test God. But for what purpose? What is the reason? Because he was strong. He already had.
Yeah, he was strong. He definitely had a whole bunch of strength. And that's like that's very true. Like for what purpose? But he's human, right? He's human at that point. And that's the thing. That's where we could connect with Samson, like his humanity. Like there's things in him where that that spirit of like testing God in a sense. It's it's like why was he anointed, right? I think that's a question that he might ask. He's going through all these trials, and as the strongest man that's around, like
My question is like you know, and I'll ask this to the public. Like, if you had Samson's strength, would you know how to use that power for a better good?
that's a great question.
Because that's exactly, I think, what he might have felt. Like, I'm going to try to put myself in Samson's shoes. If I'm feeling invincible, that I can, nobody can hurt me because I'm so strong, and I'm getting my source of my strength. I know it comes from God, even when I'm disobedient. That means I'm getting away with like consequences, right? And I'm not respecting my treaty with God, but he still have grace over me and forgives me and still allows me to have the strength. Wouldn't I, what would I feel about it? Like, would I still commit the sin? And most people will say, no, I wouldn't do it. But in real life, most of us do commit the same sins over and over and over until something tragic happens. And this is when we start unlearning the bad to learn the good. And God is so patient with us, you know, because that's where I want to go. Like, let's talk about the marriage, that first marriage with the Philistine woman. It says like he falls deeply in love with her, and that love was corresponded as well, and
Yeah.
they were happy for one another. But although his mother was always telling him, why don't disobey God. So what is your take about like seeing those
See those
conflictive
where it's so tough because even God's telling him to marry the Philistine woman. So it's like he's stuck in a thing of like the culture is saying is disobedient, but then he's obeying God and marrying the Philistine woman because that was God's way of creating the treaty. Right? And then like a lot of times like back then, the marriage is a treaty between some nations, especially during their time. Like the love there was like how how did they like Samson is very he's fighting culture from God's words. Right? Like imagine like how is he fighting God on his word as well? Like with the way like like God created a culture with the Nazarites. Like what rule is really being played?
yeah, it's like he could be easily confused.
Yeah, and maybe that's why he also tested God by eating the carcass and eating the honey.
Mm,
And during the marriage time when he was gonna get married, like his his wife did like that betrayal was that could have been seen as also like how God felt during the time.
that's a good reflection. That's a good reflection. Do you think Samson knew that God's love for him was unconditional?
I think he knew God's love with him was unconditional. Like as we go deeper into the story with Samson during his battles, he knew that also that God helped him win the battle, and then he was about to die from thirst.
Will you call that faith? That he had that much faith in God that he would just go there and nothing would happen to him?
Yes, yes, 100%. Like faith is seen in so many ways, and I think faith is so conflicting too. Faith is somewhat conflicting because it's somewhat is a it is a test to God in a sense, right? Like I'm putting all this faith into you. Like when there's the when is the harvest coming, right?
But that's a good point because also think about it, like we are told in life, right? Don't put your eggs in one basket, but God tells us, put all your eggs in my basket. Because if you put it in my basket, you will be fine. You will be taken care. Even that doesn't mean you won't go through trials and tribulations, but I will make sure you get grace and mercy, which is beyond justice. And it's sad because you see that Samson was a man that was so strong, but he had a very noble heart. He would get in love and get brokenhearted. And unfortunately, his first marriage ends up with the Philistine king, I believe, ordering to kill his wife, and they burn his wife
Oh,
and his family. And this is where, you know, there's a huge moment of grief for Samson. I can just imagine your your marriage. You married the woman that you love, and you had not even the day of your marriage, and then very soon the Philistine comes and kill his wife, and they burn her. So I
mm.
can just imagine how why Samson didn't consult with God in those times of tribulations.
Humanity, the rage probably came out like that's so hard. Like you're burning the his love, his like basically your second half, because that's what it was. It was from his rib, right? Like that's what the marriage was from. So you burn in the second half, and like rage probably would come in like
Revenge.
yeah, and that's so hard because it's also it's not from your people. It's from Philistines, right? And they're seen as a different class set than Israelites,
Mm.
right? Because Israelites are anointed by God naturally, right? And Philistines aren't. They're not in the culture of God's people. So like having that be done is just so difficult.
Yeah, also like we have to understand like Samson was kind of like had like a fighting tactic against the Philistine, like it was a gorilla. Like he was like,
He's
he
the
was
first like one man versus
yeah,
one
what
gorilla. Like a
yeah,
hundred man versus one gorilla. That's him. It's just
he
a
was like
gorilla.
one of those like Arnold or Sylvester Stallone movie type of
Yeah.
guy, like he was taking a whole army by himself. But I start to think and reflect a little bit about that moment when he loses his wife, where perhaps his faith is really tested. Like, who is he putting his trust on? And I think he put his trust on more on his own strength and to seek revenge than to really seek God for advice. And I think that was probably a critical mistake he made.
Even with his other wife too, like 'cause he had another wife where he stormed out on one of the weddings he stormed out on the Riddle wedding, and that wife was passed down to I believe was someone that was close to him. So I don't think we really know like who it was passed down to, but it was someone that must have been like really close to Samson, and the father of that bride just said, "Oh, you can have one of the sisters. She's just as beautiful, or whatever
Hmm.
it is." And he said, "No, he didn't want her." So again, there's like another rage. Like so, he lost like two loves
Hmm.
from that. So he has like I think it's like his heartbreak is what makes him is probably what made him like fall into sin of lust. Like you
But
have all your wives dying or being taken away. Like what is like why? It's like why is God doing that? Like how do you? It's so hard to turn to God during those tribulations.
I think he did it to himself too, because the constant disobedience leads into tragedy.
Mm,
And you see that through the story of the Bible, right? You see that normally the disobedience brings destruction. It doesn't bring harmony. And Samson, you see that too, like
mm,
constantly testing God's patience.
mm,
And it's like, and his mom, which loved Samson to death, was always telling him, like, don't do this, avoid this. You are being anointed. Why are you, trying to test the Lord? And I do think that perhaps that was his a lot of his downfall, not listening to his passions and his loss instead of listening to God.
Yeah, it's so hard. But then he did listen to God for like the he listened to him for the wars, you know? When Samson was going through those battles, God was there with him, and he knew that God was there with him because God helped him win those battles. He had the strength from God from that. And that's one of the interesting pieces about Samson because that faith was there and God always stuck by him. And like we'll see that even like when he gets captured, right? The strongest man in the Bible gets captured. But even when he gets captured, God is still with him to but God gave him a mission. Like that's the hard part too, because God gives when God gives you a mission, even since birth, the mission still plays on forward.
Exactly. You can't avoid it because
No,
it's
like
almost like it's written.
yeah, yeah, like it's written. It's like like Jonah when he tries to avoid his mission to get swallowed by the whale.
Well, exactly. And
Yeah.
put in the rights. But God is so good with us because He allows us to transform into what we need to become. And it's the patience of understanding that because we can't see His vision. Because think about it, like this whole step of his wife dying by the hands of the Philistine has a bigger purpose. Because right after that, what does Samson does? He goes on a rage, and with I think it's with the head of a dead,
Oh, the donkey bone,
yeah,
the donkey chin.
yes, with the donkey chin, he kills what about I think it's like
Yeah, it kills like 1,000 men.
1,000 men. Like, think about the rage he had, the thirst for vengeance towards his enemies. Now God is telling, well, God is trying to liberate them from the Philistines because the Philistines were evil. They adored Baal. They didn't respect God. They had they had really bad rituals as well, right? For what I understand, they were very promiscuous as well, and God didn't like that as well. And so Samson goes on a rampage of revenge, and and he was hiding in a cave. I remember, and when he goes out to fight all these Philistines, one thing that I do admire, and I don't know if it was because of his rage or was because he had faith that God was going to be him in the battle zone that he just goes and confronts. Imagine 1,000 people.
I think it's from that faith because it's also God's. It's so fun. God is so funny, right? But it's so funny in mysterious ways. Because then, if that didn't happen, if Samson's wife didn't get burned, he went on that, and if he didn't go on that rage, those 1,000 men wouldn't be. They wouldn't have gone to war and that, right? And that's 1,000 Philistines down, right? Like God, like
Cleaning up that army.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Cleaning up the army slowly, right? It's a slow trickle of God cleaning it up. That yeah, we'll see that he does a massive take on the on Samson's last end of his story where we'll see it where he takes down a lot the whole army and all the commanders and all that. So God has his plan. God has
Yes.
his plan with Samson even when his wife is dying. Um,
But it,
but after that battle, like Samson knew that the battle was won because God gave him water afterwards. He was
thirsty.
thirsty.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. You know, I forgot about that detail.
yeah.
He was thirsty.
And he opened a well. God gave him a well of water right after the battle. So it's like God anointed him to for that battle to take place, and he needed to be that one
But
to do it.
but I love the specifics of how God is so merciful and he protects Samson. Like, for example, the water is a good example. Like, God didn't have to do that, but he did it out of all that love he has for Samson. Like, he loves Samson. So I believe that that talks a lot about how God, even when we're disobedient, and because we have a purpose for him, how he would protect us from these situations as well.
That's like a transfiguration moment. with the water. Like, that's God showing himself, but not his face, right? But showing himself in the earth through the world. Like, here goes your water, here goes your spring. Like, that's Samson asking. Ask you shall receive. Especially if it's for God.
No, definitely, definitely, and I do think that also um, Samson, it's as he's battling the Philistines, is he doing it for himself or is he doing it for God? And that's one mystery we don't know in the Bible. Also, I'm kind of like intrigued about like for example, in these times of lust, because we don't know that, but I'm assuming that Samson was young during the times of him uh, looking for these females. You know, I'm assuming he's young. He's a young adult, and he's into that moment where he is he's in those moments of like high testosterone too,
Mhm.
and adventure, and he seeks adventure in the world. But what surprises me, like he doesn't seek adventure with God, because he was anointed, so his adventure should be seeking more of the Lord instead of seeking more of the world. But you see how he even takes revenge on his own hand, and then God allow him to be as strong to fulfill that, against those 1,000 Philistines.
He came as a judge too.
Well,
Like,
that's what you got a good point. He came as a judge.
yeah, and that's the hard. Like, Samson, like, I think Samson's adventure and his seek was like in the battlefield. Like, that's probably where he was connected most with God in the battlefield. Like, like imagine that you have God's strength as you're fighting. Like, that's must be such a transcendent
Mm,
like experience that Samson must have gone through, right? And to have that out to imagine like just coming from battle, just you have that adrenaline, like you have. I think he Samson like imagine like we talk about like veterans, right? Like just imagine like him, but in like melee combat and melee contact like
mm.
war, and like that's a that those battlefields were like
Yeah, I think you're seeing like mutilations. You're seeing people getting gutted, beheaded. It was more savage in those bad. And you got to remember when he picks the donkey chin and he starts killing all the Philistine. This is hand to hand combat, and he's fighting against the Philistine. I think it's the Bronze Era, if I'm not mistaken, from the Philistines. So they have weapons like swords, these curved swords, and Samson is taking them one by one. Like he's seeing how he's wounding all these people and hurting them.
how do you even recover from that, right? Like after battlefield, like after those journey, like what is the recovery for that? Like you go to God for the recovery, and I think maybe that's where his weaknesses came out. Like his weaknesses wasn't in his strengths or his in those moments, but his weaknesses come from the seven sins, right? And
Hmm.
like one of his weaknesses was lust, and it's you, I don't know what it's like to be in combat, but I can only imagine like w- afterwards, like spirits probably go down because it like no matter what, like if you hit such a big high, like you have to come back down. Like when you go down, it might go
Back
really
even
far.
further.
Yeah,
You're right. I think also like the Bible says that like killing in time of war is not condemnable. Like that's perhaps why, like for example, David and and many other characters in the Bible, are not judged as killers because they're in the battlefield fighting for freedom. So it's not considered like a murder sin. But in Samson's situation, uh, I think his biggest sin is not only lust, it's disobedience. It's constant disobedience, not understanding what God really intended his strength was for, and he uses it as his own revenge and not a revenge for God, not a source of strength for God. And I think that's also something that I look into. It's like he was always using strength because he had a vendetta, because something happened to him personally. And it wasn't about God, it was about him and his passions. So I think that disobedience also has a lot to do with how Samson couldn't understand, and he was blind because of that, you know. And it's sad to see somebody like Samson because I don't think he was a good-hearted man, but he was weak in that aspect.
Yeah, disobedience is like that. That's so hard too, because it's like you know, it is that battlefield, the battlefield moments, like
Yeah,
that that are just tough or something. It's that recovery, like, and then you're recovering. It's the recovery from that wife, recovery from betrayal, also from his other wife, and then it's recovery from all those battlefield moments. Like, when is this guy gonna break? Right? Like, he doesn't get it. That's the hard part. Also, when anointed by God, you don't get a break. You know,
exactly.
you gotta push through when you're anointed by God. You push through. You push through with the faith in God. And I think for what Samson had at the moment, he tried his best for what he had, but at the same time, he's still human. And I think God knows that, right? He knows his struggles. He knows what he'll struggle with. It's written in the Bible in so many stories of us just the human struggle.
Mm.
Like, even within the prophets, even within the judges, even within all of them, just there's a human struggle that goes on. Um,
That struggle is our lack for of our faith too. You know, our lack for seeking God. And I think the worst is when we're doing well, is when we forget God the most.
and that's so hard too, because God, it's like God also tests our faith. You know, like God gives us test on the faith for it, right? Like, if Samson didn't go into those battles with faith in God, he could have gone with his faith in his Nazareth believer with God in there. He could have lost all those battles. If David didn't have faith in God, um, with all
Mm.
those trials, he would have lost against Goliath.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's like those are situations where like the faith is played out,
Or it's
but
tested.
it's yeah, it's tested in so many ways, and I think God does that to test our convictions.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, you're right. I think Samson's conviction was always being tested, and I don't I don't believe Samson understood what God really wanted for him. You know, I asked myself, like, if let's say Samson didn't have a lust for women, what would his strength be used for as a judge? What would be the alternative? What did God intended really his strength to be for? Maybe it was to, I don't know, build higher walls or construct better agriculture. You know, I'm just,
Yeah.
being hypothetical, but it could have been because we sometimes say, like, yes, we put in all these trials and tribulations, but most of the trials and tribulations that we go through are because we put ourselves there. And Samson is an example of that. Samson,
Sometimes you have to obliterate your enemies, right? That's like that's what God does. That's what he's doing with Samson, you know, the judges. Sometimes you gotta obliterate them before they
they obliterate you.
yeah. Yeah, which they're trying to do, right? They're
Well,
tormenting the Israelites.
they tormented it for, we're talking about hundreds of years. And then think about that, like,
Imagine someone gets bullied like God, if God lives in His people, then He got bullied for 100 and something years
Mm,
by Baal, and
yeah.
Baal lives in His people,
No.
then then he got bullied by Baal. And I was like, I'm not gonna take this bullying no more when he's a
Yeah, he's
more,
above there.
yeah.
It's fascinating because then after he kills these 1,000 soldiers, I'm pretty sure the Philistines could have taken him more serious. They were, I'm pretty sure they were frightened. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, 1,000 of my soldiers with weapons, they got mauled.
Oh yeah, yeah. They got my donkey jawbone.
That's what I'm saying. Like this guy doesn't even wear an armor.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, nothing. And if I'm not mistaken, the way he starts the killing of these 1,000 soldiers is like his people is asking him to surrender to the Philistines, and they find him in a cave.
Huh.
And when they find him in the cave, that's when they convince Samson because the Philistines were going to start. I think it was like collecting and taking away their harvest and killing them. And because of that, they asked Samson to please consider surrendering. And this is when he surrenders, and they tie him up and everything. And as he's tied up, that's when he's set loose, and he says, you're gonna feel the wrath of God. So,
Oh, but before we get to the surrendering part, he also gets betrayed in how he surrenders with Delilah,
oh,
yeah, with the prostitute from the Philistines, because yeah, Samson he's a noble guy and he has a big heart. Problem is, he falls in love with the prostitute and falls in love with the Philistine prostitute that betrays him. So in that story with Delilah, Delilah works is working with the Philistine soldiers, and Samson doesn't know it. So Samson loves her a lot, and Delilah asks him a question: How do you get tied up with all your strength? And Samson gives her an answer like, from a bowstring. You can tie
yeah.
my hands from a bowstring and it won't go through. And Delilah then ties his hands with the bowstring. And then at night she starts screaming, "The Philistines, Philistines!" And Samson breaks out. And there's no Philistines that are there. He was like, "Or is everything good?" Because his noble heart.
Hmm.
All right. And Delilah says, "Oh, everything's so good, but why have you she feels either betrayed or she feels what's another word for feeling stupid? Like,
Yeah, she feels like he's well that he's lying to her.
yeah,
Like and the question is, did Samson do this because he didn't trust her?
there's, I think yeah, I don't think he did trust her because there is that it's that could be also a test from God, a little disobedience way as well.
Because only God and him knew,
Only
and
God.
his mother.
Yeah, yeah. Only God him knew and his mom. And Delilah doesn't only test him one time with that with how do you get tied.
It's multiple times.
Yeah, she asks him multiple times. She starts pleading with Samson. She's like, Samson, tell me. You don't love me if you don't tell me. And she's like, you're betraying me if you don't tell me. All that, all that is stuff that is said for him just to tell her. And then when Samson finally tells her, out of like, he just doesn't want to hear the pleas anymore. He doesn't want the cries. He's like, all right, I'll just, here goes the beans. The way you tie, I never had a razor to my head. So you had to tie, you just shave my head and I could be tied.
Okay.
And at night, she saves his head and all his strength is gone just like that.
And since you mentioned this, like the importance of having a good partner, because in Samson's situation, he's being the most vulnerable to his partner, which is Delilah. And then when you choose the wrong partner, you see what could happen. And this is why perhaps we human beings don't like to be vulnerable, because when we expose what really hurts us, when we expose our weaknesses, it's like we feel that the betrayal can come at any moment, or what you have said can be exposed. And in that moment, it's like, what is it that you lose when you open up so much? And you see him, Samson, he loses everything.
Mhm.
He loses, you know, I would even say his connection with God. And it's not because God is not present, it's just he removed himself from the presence of God. And he betrays himself. He betrays himself by not keeping God's word, by not being obedient, and by not understanding that, yes, the love of a woman is great, but the love of God is superior and it's pure. And that's where you need to deposit your vulnerabilities. I start thinking about what you were just saying. Like, where do you deposit your vulnerabilities, your secrets? And, you know, when we when we confess that our weakness is like Samson's, being shaved, where do we go to? Do we really seek God in those moments that we are on the lowest, like Samson was?
Mhm.
You know, I start to ask, I'm starting to ask myself, what is Samson and Delilah trying to teach us on that moment of betrayal? Is it, and I'll ask this to the public, like, what do you think? Do you think Delilah's more responsible or Samson's more responsible for the betrayal that happens and his capture? Let us know. You can comment. Let us know what you think. What do you think about that? Uh,
Ooh. I want to do one more. We have a little comment from Autumn. She says, I think Samson was physically strong but spiritually vulnerable. How do you guys think Delilah exposed the true nature of this weakness? Right
yeah.
on money with the questions here.
Yeah, I agree with Autumn. I do think that because it's a repeated behavior that they saw from Samson. He was always succumbing to the desires of women. So the Philistine knew that they couldn't beat him through strength, but they could beat him through being agile into getting into his heart. And I do believe that that was the key moment when they understood that it wasn't even his hair, his vulnerability, but was his heart, getting into his heart.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and
He was in love with her.
well, also the Philistine king saw that when he was enraged, right? And then that was the trigger moment of when I do think that Samson really exposed his real vulnerability. And like I said, God God shows us that, that when you journey with him, he covers your vulnerability like Christ does, right? Like we can't be without sin. But when you walk with Christ, you're vindicated because you're walking with Christ that has no sin. But it's not because of you or what actions you do that are going to vindicate you with God. No, it's through the Lord that does. And I think that's what Samson chose the wrong partner. You had Jesus, God, in one side, and you had Delilah, and he chose Delilah as that to journey through that spiritual journey uh, in a way. And I do think that that's a good question. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
I liked it. I like it because with that, it's I think Delilah is the fault for Samson's vulnerability, but then Samson is also the fault for his own vulnerability as well. Samson has accountability for his own parts where he can't fall into the traps of certain things,
Mm.
right? And he fell into that trap of it. Like Samson's
But
one,
he almost set up the trap for himself.
he did set up the trap for himself. He knew he was entering into Philistine gates. You know, like even when he went to Philistine and he met up with Delilah, like the Philistines knew. You know, like he entered their town and they closed the town
Hmm.
for him. They're like, Samson is here, Samson is here, but they didn't do it out of fear, right? Because they had a whole setup that
Set up.
was going
Yeah,
on.
yeah. You're right. You're right.
So in that they were just they set him up for it. Like his own vulnerability came from himself, and for him to think like he's stronger than that, like it's so hard, right? And I like what you said about like the race he had in the beginning. That was like his first vulnerable sign. Like that was like a good vulnerable sign because that goes down to like strategy. Like, how do you strategize to take down the biggest man,
Mhm.
right? Or the man
And
that take that killed 1,000 of your soldiers. Like, that's a threat, right? That's a threat to the
of
Philistines.
course, and but what's important also is like you see through the Bible that also you see that his family understands his vulnerability. So it's not exposed externally, but God is showing us that our behaviors, like we internalize our behaviors and habits, and those that know us well understand our vulnerability, but they're not exposed. And Samson goes through that process too. Like his mom knows his vulnerability, the people, the Israelites that are looking for him know his vulnerabilities, but yet the Philistines can't figure that out because it's kept in secret.
Mm.
And then, but then when it externalized, when information gets into the wrong hands, it can be exploited. And you can see the difference between the Israelites' behavior of like protecting Samson, right? Because that's God's people and God is there, versus the Philistine that are destructive, right? When that information get into their hands, what did they use it for?
Yeah, they use it to like take him down. Like that is tough.
Well, I also think, and this is going more of a to think about like his physical appearance, because this guy is supposed to be muscular, tall, like he was probably a women magnet too. Like many women probably look at him very appealing, and he probably never worked his spirit to become strong, to not be that, I would say, like that superstar that women saw him and they were like just throwing themselves to him.
Yeah, he looked like the Fabio of the time.
Yeah, he was a Fabio with the long hair, bro.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, like I put myself like I can imagine because of his stature and just his look and muscles, he must have been attracting a lot of women.
Yeah, right. That's where you have to really set up your defenses as a man for it, right? Like set up your defenses as a man. It's important because that's that's you exposing your vulnerabilities. You choose your partner, and when you choose your partner, your vulnerabilities do get exposed, and your partner is gonna know the ins and outs of you. Like especially if they're like, yeah, if you have the right partner, they know they're gonna know that in and out, and they're gonna protect your vulnerability, or they're gonna exploit your vulnerability for their own benefit. So they're gonna exploit it for other people's benefits, like Delilah exploited Samson's benefit for the Philistines.
Yeah, and
You
he well,
know,
she sold him to the Philistines because they had a treaty.
but it's so hard to like. Why was Samson didn't believe in her too? Because she just sells herself anyway, right? Like to already in that type of person to already do something just like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why would you even like all faults on Samson's? Because one,
Mm-hmm.
you're with the prostitute, so she's already selling herself or her body, right? Like that's there. You can't trust that, right? Like how do you trust that? Two, if she sells herself to Samson, she's gonna sell herself also to the army and sell herself to information, sell herself all for that. So like that's bad. And like Samson should have read all those.
The signs.
Yeah, he should have read those signs and obeyed God. But that's what comes when you don't obey God, right? Like that's ball in a sense.
But you notice that, like, for example, Solomon, and that had all the wisdom, and then the most wise of all, and then you have Samson, the most strong of all, fall into the same sin of lust.
It's
It's very
Eve.
exactly, and that's why I wanted to go. It's like, and this is the responsibility I see that God tells us here. It's like you can be Samson in the world, and you can be tempted, but during your moments of temptation, do you want to choose to look at the cross and be with Jesus, or do you want to go back to being Adam? And I think that's the choice that Samson is showing us in the Bible, and see, and it's almost like an example of like, where are you depositing your trust?
Yeah.
You can, do you want to put your deposit, you want to deposit your trust in, literally, in the hands of evil, or do you want to put it in me? Let's see what they're saying. Let's
Yeah.
see.
I love what you guys are saying. So, in your opinion, how do the people we form close relationships with influence our walk with God?
I
Mm.
do think that the influence that people have with us is, they can lead with good and bad examples.
Hmm.
Now, we choose how do we want to use that information for us. Like, for example, you can have a father that can be a drunk and drinks every day, and you can dislike that behavior. Now, being exposed to that can traumatize you. But at the end of the day, you make the ultimate choice to say, like, do you want to be equal to your father, or that had a bad habit of drinking, or do you want to do something better than that in your life?
Yeah.
And it's a choice at some point in your life, where you have to also understand that God works in that way too. He's going to show you the bad example so you don't fall into the trap, because you're viewing it. And I think that's called wisdom, when you see what others do but you don't do, because you see the bad example already, so you choose to go in the other way. So
Even the
I,
most wisest fell.
exactly, even the most wisest. But God always gives you a choice, and
Mhm.
He's going to put different, not only examples but also tribulations, for you to understand, like, okay, you didn't learn through the example, so you're gonna go through the hard rock now, and then you're gonna see what that feels and look like. Now you're gonna get the practice, because I show you the theory, and
Mhm.
you didn't understand the theory, you didn't choose wisely to the theory, so I'm not gonna make you walk through the journey of that practice. But I do think that it's our job to dissect the information and try to do the best that we can to avoid uh, deviating ourselves. And even if we deviate ourselves, and when we are in those moments of tribulation, it's like, which side are you choosing? Are you choosing to go to Delilah and deposit your trust in Delilah? Are you choosing Christ? Are you choosing God, where you know that you're going to face tribulation, but you're going to learn, and at the end of the day, you're going to be the ultimate winner, because at that point, when you have God by your side, think about it, not only that you journey with God, that you got His unconditional love and mercy and grace, but also you had the best teacher with you that never abandoned you. Delilah, on the other hand, we already know what she does. She's gonna sell you out.
Yeah, yeah, she's gonna say, she's gonna make sure you get taken down and taken into custody, all that. She's gonna make sure all
Yeah.
that goes through. But
And it's sad that, we are all capable of betrayal.
mhm,
All of us, every single one of us. Even if we have our strong in convictions, ethics, morals, if we don't have God in our heart, our convictions are gonna fall into our human nature
yeah,
at some point.
trust also falls into faith, right? Because like betrayal is open to anybody you expose your vulnerabilities to, right? And betrayal is open to that. We do that willingly. Sometimes we show our own vulnerabilities willingly. And sometimes we try to hide our own vulnerabilities, but just by presence and just being there all the time, you're like it just naturally gets spotted,
Mm.
right? So like at you open your like sometimes you willingly open yourself up for an opportunity of betrayal to happen. You just have faith that it won't happen, and you have faith in the trust of that person, of with that person, right? And that's where trust and faith come and coincide
Mm.
together. Like for example, with the influence that was asked, uh, for people who I don't think are going through a hard time, or for people that I don't think are going through their own trials, if they're having an easy life, it makes me question,
Mm.
like, are they really walking with God? Because God doesn't call us to an easy life. He doesn't call us to comforts.
Well, he tells us carry your cross,
Yeah, he
right?
tells us exactly carry our cross. And our crosses aren't light; they're heavy.
You think Delilah was Samson's cross?
I think Delilah, yeah, she was. Ah, yeah, she probably was Samson's cross. Those are Delilah's probably like all those moments of preparation with his wife beforehand, and then with the marriage that was happening, like all those moments of preparation for his trial that was going to go down
Mm.
with Delilah, like things that he could have done beforehand that could have saved those moments. He didn't do with Delilah to save himself. Like he should have recognized those signs. He should have went through all
Well,
those
but
things.
that's interesting because when we choose a partner, do we ask do we who do we ask for guidance when we choose a partner? And guys, you can ask us questions. What are your thoughts about, like when we choose our partner? Like for example, Samson uh, asking, well, Samson choosing Delilah as a partner and not really, I would say, investigating who she was or even consulting with others about who, if she could be somebody that could be reliable, or even more important, praying to the Lord to seek that advice or that guidance from God if that was the right call as a partner. Because I do think when we select a partner, we select our partners based on our belief system, morality, also, our sight, if we like
Attractiveness.
attractionness,
Yeah.
and something that Samson did most of the time. So maybe this is also a story about like God teaching us like what are you, when you're looking for partner, are you what where are you seeking your knowledge in finding your partner?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially as a man as well, right? Like you have to look for a great partner as a man and as a woman, right? But I want to talk about like the man side because I don't know too much of the woman's side, right? So even in custodies and courts now, like
There's a lot
most
of
of the time,
entitlements. That's the issue. Like
yeah,
Delilah shows us that she felt entitled to for Samson to reveal his secret.
yeah, right. That is like a lot of entitlement for that. Like, but Sansa should have held strong
Yeah,
to
Samson had no
that.
obligation to tell her. If you really think about it,
But he was trying to do it out of love,
exactly, an
right?
act of love, but that's the point. Well, she was selling him out anyway. But
Hmm.
where do you draw the line where it says like, hey, something, we're together, but that's something I can't reveal to you and
Right.
leave it as it is.
That has to go from like within action, within choosing a partner. You have to go. There has to be like multiple. It's based on like compatibility. It's based on growth together, right?
but
It's
also
based on
setting up healthy boundaries.
yeah.
And I don't think that's what Samson didn't understand is like for example, God teaches us on the Bible how you can have healthy boundaries for yourself so you can come to God and
Hmm.
wrestle ideas with God and start learning how to have more faith and walk with Jesus, right? But you can see on Samson's side, he had very little healthy boundaries for his relationship with himself and to God.
It's,
And for that, he was very vulnerable to his partner.
yeah, and he didn't create his own boundaries either. It was like the boundaries were given to him as just a little kid.
That's a good point.
Hmm.
You hit it on the notch because it's true. He had to be obedient to a set of rules that he didn't fulfill. So how could he fulfill good boundaries for himself to protect himself against evil when he
Yeah.
disobeyed God's rule?
Mm.
That's a good point.
Right, right. How can he?
Yeah, how could you know
Unsteady foundation, right? He had to redeem himself, right? As like confession, right? That's one of the ways. And like all has been opening up my eyes to like how confession is the redemption for for the foundation to not be like unsteady anymore, right?
hmm,
That's one of the big things.
that's a good point, man.
But that's also why I love Samson a lot too, because like to go to confession, you're already going like not 100% perfect, right? Again, God doesn't choose his people to be perfect. Even till the end, he was still with Samson. Even till the end,
Yeah,
he was
I
still
love
with
I bro, the ending gives me teary eye. Let's read what somebody asked
him.
us a
Yeah.
question, I think.
Loving this, guys. Do you think Samson was more attracted to Delilah or to the idea of being loved? Maybe he forgot his identity was rooted in God's love.
That's a very good question.
Mm,
That what's your point of view? Like that's a very good question.
that is a very good question.
Because
Oh.
maybe God gave him rules and a lot of tribulations that
Hmm.
he probably saw that like it was all about discipline, but within discipline there's love
Yeah.
because it's structuring you. And perhaps with Delilah was all the passion, the easiness, the access. With God was always like I'm gonna structure you so you can be stronger than what the strength that I'm giving you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. Yeah, definitely. Because mm, I think I was more attached. How can
I think Delilah's love was easy.
I think Delilah's love was easy for her. Yeah, prostitute, you pay,
Yeah.
right? Like,
So she know how to convince you too, right?
yeah, right. That's thing. Like paying for a virgin. Like, why couldn't he just accept God's love? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like for example, if we want to walk well with God, we need to be obedient. And you can see that Samson had a lot of issue with being disobedient with God. And that's the cost of love. Like it's a sacrifice. And perhaps that's where and I love the question because maybe Samson when he was with God, it was all about sacrificing and working hard
But
and
obedience, it's kind of hard too within the obedience part because it's like he was obedient to Delilah, right? Like in an act of love, that was an obedience
that's a good point.
to Delilah.
He did it for Delilah, but he didn't do it for God.
Like God's way was, I think God's way was like in the trenches, in the warfare. Like if he wasn't, I don't. It wasn't other way. Yeah, that's true. Because when he ate the carcass, ate the honey, fermented honey, and tested that carcass, like that is disobedience.
Well, he also married the Philistine woman that his tribe was telling him not to do.
And then that was God's
That's
anointedness too.
exactly,
That's
and
like an obedience that he was fulfilling.
exactly. It's so I do think just my way of thinking is that I do think that Samson had a hard time understanding that God's love is to make you grow
Mm.
into learning how to love yourself in the process. And how do you do that? It's not only about obedience and rules, it's about those boundaries that God creates for your own health, for your own mental peace, for your own being stable, and not thinking about corruption and vengeance, because that's what he got every time he separated from God. Revenge, rage, war, and he took that road, and God was always rescuing him,
Mhm.
until he chose again to go with Delilah. That Delilah sold him for silver coins,
Yeah.
which is kind of goes back to Jesus being sold, no? And
Oh yeah, by Judah.
yeah, like Judah. So, but this is the sad part. He gets captured. And guys, if you have a question with about Samson being captured, and since we're going into the realm of betrayal, because let's put ourselves in the on the shoes of Samson. He's shaved. He wakes up. He has no hair, and now he's weak and vulnerable. And he looks at Delilah's eyes, and all he sees is that he's being betrayed. What do you think hurt him the most? Losing his strength, or being betrayed by someone he loved?
You know, I think it was being betrayed by someone he loved, but I think he understood what was happening in that situation because he gets when the Philistines capture him, they say, "Don't kill me here, take
Mm,
me somewhere else." For like it just I'll give myself freely, so you guys could go, but just don't kill me here under that word, right? So like
mm,
that betrayal of Samson being shaved and having that experience is probably like God's experience when He feels betrayed by us. Like that might be like the lived manifestation of what God is like
mm.
when He's betrayed by us. Where
Well, yeah, it's the reaction, right, of humiliation,
yeah,
feeling humiliated, not knowing where to stick your head,
yeah,
right? And also think about like Delilah. Could Delilah look at his at Samson after doing all that?
she was probably counting her coins. You know, like, she probably didn't care no more.
She was like, "I'm buying some Bitcoin for this,"
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. She probably was. She probably took that bag, let the soldiers do whatever they had to do, and just went.
and just walk away.
Yeah, because it's in the name. She's a prostitute, right? Like
She's used to that.
she's used that is the transaction that she goes through. It's like not all right. I guess not. I don't want to generalize all like prostitutes for that, right? But like I guess in that majority of it, it's that is the transaction that she just went through. It was like
You know what's
it's
funny? I see Delilah more less being Eve and more being the snake.
yeah, she's more the snake. Take a bite.
Yes, take a bite, and she's constantly testing it.
Uh-huh.
With Eve, she was also tested, but Delilah is
She doesn't have an innocence.
exactly. There's no innocence in her. She
Mhm.
knows what she's doing, and she negotiated that already. So when she went there, I just wonder if she had a conscience about, like, because being with this guy for all this time, she could have felt something for Samson as well, as much as she knew she was betraying.
Right? But again, the snake in the garden. Right? That's such a great way to describe Delilah into it because it is the snake in the garden. If she did fall in love with Samson, that that would have been it wouldn't have been that like she wouldn't have done anything like that,
Mhm.
right? Like
Well, her heart was corrupted. That tells you how when you
let's say
choose
Judah, because Judah loved
exactly
Jesus, but then he sold him for
for yeah
coin.
pieces of silver, but that's the thing. Like, her heart was corrupted just because look at the God she was serving.
Mhm.
So you can see the difference when you serve Baal, how you can easily sell somebody else and perhaps not even feel remorse. We have another question, I think.
I think it's also a little scary too when you also serve Jesus, right? You sometimes will end up on the cross like him, right?
But you're
Like,
not betrayed.
but you're not that is true. But you're not betrayed because you have His love. You're with Him in that.
Exactly. You're
Oh,
glorified, as a matter of fact, because what Jesus did already, it's like you go to a restaurant and everything is paid off. You don't have to like grace and mercy. Like you eat, oh, you don't have the money, don't worry, I'll forgive you. But you know something, for my grace, I'll even give you dessert on top of it. It's like that's how good Jesus is with us. And I like what you were just saying right now, Kebs, because you have a good point. Like,
and his endings, Samson was on. He was on the cross in
yes,
his endings. It
yes,
is exactly like Jesus' stories. He got sold for a bag of silver. Ends up to
that's
be
that's
given
actually
over to him.
interesting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't see that connection until you told
Yeah,
me
yeah. So right, let's
that.
read what they're
Yeah.
asking us.
I think he realized he betrayed himself and God because he allowed his heart to wander away from the truth that God speaks over him. Mm,
I definitely agree. I think he stopped listening to God
mm.
and he started to listen more to his own temptations. What else is there?
Do you think by the end of his life was Samson closer to God or further away? Ooh.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh,
That's a
that's
good
hard.
one. And
Oh,
we're
we
we're
haven't
gonna
touched
go.
on that
Oh yeah, and we're gonna go in there because
yet.
now Samson gets captured and he gets blinded and he's put into a cell. And this is where the question comes and he reconnects with God. He
Mhm.
starts praying and praying and praying. And
God gives him a sign.
exactly, he gives them the sign. And but what is beautiful is like, let's think about that moment in the cell when he couldn't see and they humiliated him and they probably beat him up, right? Treated him like very poorly. But yet this is where he finds peace because all he's thinking is about God, his relationship with God. Like nothing else exists. He can't see anything. Everything is dark, but all he sees is God now. What are your thoughts about that, Kels?
Sometimes, like, we hear that God doesn't want us to be in isolation and things like that. But then sometimes you have to be in isolation to connect the most
Just
with.
like the desert.
Just like, yes, just like the desert. You gotta be in the desert to connect the most with God.
Mm.
You gotta start. It is a wrestle with God when you're in isolation. It's a questioning and it's a direct connection as well. Like it's directly to it. Like there's nothing else I could go around. And it might be his one of his strongest cons yeah,
Consolations.
consolations with God.
Yeah. Yeah, I like what you're saying because what is God teaching us here through Samson's story? But then you see this in Jesus when he goes to the desert. And you see this with the Israelites going on those 40 years in the desert. It's like isolation is supposed to be, especially vulnerable isolation, is your moment where you need to learn how to lament to the Lord and to pray to Him and connect and ask Him for mercy and ask Him questions about like your own doubts, your own tribulations, your pain, and deposit all that you're feeling towards Him. And I think Samson is teaching us that, like, he's teaching us like, and there's a point where he says in scripture, I have never seen so clearly, you know,
Yeah,
and it's beautiful when he says that.
yeah. Sometimes that solitude and isolation will connect it. God
Hmm.
will speak through it.
Well,
But
he's learning,
yeah,
right? What do you think God is? There's definitely a communing in between Samson and the Lord in that moment where he's blind and in the cell. What you think is God doing or telling him?
he has him back in the womb or back in a rebirth stage.
I like that. He's being reborn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's being
like
reborn again.
Nicodemus.
Yes, yes, yes. There's
That's his
exactly what
Nicodemus moment. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like
I
that. Maybe he feels that way, right?
mm-hmm.
What do
Yeah.
you guys think? Do you guys feel that that reconnection with God is like what Jesus tells us to be? How can we be reborn again in spirit? Because I think that's what he's going. He's finally connecting with his spiritual journey with
Mhm.
God.
And I think he's seeing more of his purpose now again. And from his
Mm.
purpose, he does his own little strategizing,
Mm-hmm.
and he knows that everybody's gonna go there. So there's this big party that
Yes.
goes on, and they want Samson to display. They want to display Samson like he's a
Trophy or something like that.
yes, yes. And they don't recognize that Samson has been praying and he has been confessing and he has been going to the Lord and he has been he's being reborn with the Lord. The Lord starts sculpting him back up, right? He starts giving him his strength again. And as Samson starts growing his hair back,
Mm-hmm.
something that once he lost,
Mm.
for all his strength to be gone, starts coming back slowly as the Lord gives him, and it starts anointing him back into him. So Samson, what does he do? There's a whole party that goes on in the Philistines, and he's blind.
They're having like a feast, right?
Yeah, there's a big feast that goes. All the generals are
Yes.
there. All the armies are there. Like everybody in the middle in that military for the Philistines.
Politicians.
Yes, politicians, all the corrupt ones, right?
Yep.
They're all there underneath that one roofing.
That's crazy.
Right,
That's
right.
crazy.
What do you think, Sam? What do you think was happening in Samson's mind when when he was captured and he's in that cell and he knows that he's about to get paraded?
You know, you know what I think? It's like he must have been because he connected with God.
Uh huh.
I think he probably was he probably finally understood that his personal journey should have been more of a personal journey with God. And when he reconnected with the Lord and was reborn again, because this is the beauty. You just said something that, my God, like stroked me. His hair was growing again. And that's what God intends to do with us, to make us grow again when we go back into the spirit journey with Him. And our purpose becomes bigger because the purpose of God is always going to serve a higher purpose than our personal purpose. What do I mean with this? Everyone in life wants to be a big CEO, a big superstar. Is that what God intends you to do? Is that bigger than God's journey for you and purpose? And I think that's the question we got to ask ourselves, because the calling for Samson was probably a wake up call for all of us. Samson suffered all of this to let us know, choose the Lord. He will rebuild you because you're blinded in the world when you choose your personal journey and you put Jesus outside of your life. And this is what hit me when you said the hair growing back. That's exactly what happens when we connect with God. We grow back. We are reborn, like you said, with like Nicodemus. We're this new creature, and our strength is not only the strength of what we physically see, but it's the strength of the purpose that God has for us. And I love, bro, you just put it, you just laid it out really beautifully, man.
That was you laid it out great.
And
That was really
I
great.
think we have another
Yeah.
question. What did they say?
Hmm. Suffering a blow from sin and realizing we need a savior is so humbling and eye-opening. It definitely is like your heart being born again. Ooh.
Yeah, that's a good manifestation, because we do have to become humble that we all need God's presence and we need his unconditional love.
Mhm.
And you can see in the story of Samson, like up to when he was blind, his life had a purpose of its own, but it was going in many directions, but in no direction at the same time. It was
Mhm.
just chaotic. It was just everywhere. I'm fighting the Philistines. I'm getting married. I'm being a fugitive. It's like many ways, but it leads to nowhere. God at the end, he goes back and has a purpose when he's blind, and he's there in front of everyone, humiliated. Because like you said, he's surrounded by all these generals. They probably bullying the hell out of him. You know?
Yeah, you're probably throwing rotten tomatoes at him
Yeah,
and
they're
things like that.
spitting on him, right?
Yeah.
You know, like and he's not even paying attention to that.
No, he has a mission. He has his own mission while he's there. He's like, it's okay, just forgive it on, just keep going. But right when I get to that column,
You'll see God's wrath.
yeah.
Exactly. And it wasn't about the revenge he was seeking personally against the Philistines. He understood that the Philistines, God had an issue because of their bad behaviors and their bad practices, and because they were adoring the devil, Baal. All right. And because of that, it wasn't about getting to the columns about, oh, you hurt me and you blinded me, because he says, Lord, what is it that he says when he's at the columns? He says, Lord, manifest your power, right? Give me strength once more. And he starts like pushing the columns. And then I can imagine the chaos.
So it's crumbling down
The
and
Philistines.
yeah, right.
Well, the Philistines must have been like, what is going on? Like,
Yeah, because he did act. He like Samson. He did ask the Lord, please give me your strength one more.
more time.
Uh huh.
And look at the grace of God, right? Because God could have been like, well, I gave you too many chances.
Hmm.
Like we do. We humans beings do that. Oh, I gave you too many chances. Sometimes we even get one chance, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And God is saying, okay, I think you learned the lesson. I know you're gonna use it for my name and not for your sake.
yeah, yeah. And that's exactly what he did. He showed the glory of God through Samson, and that's the beauty of Samson. It is the glory of God through him, and through even his brokenness, God was still with
With him. That's the beauty of that story. It's like Samson failed, but God was never failed him.
him. Hmm.
Let's see what.
He will always be there. God will always be there. What do you guys think Samson's redemption teaches us about how God can still use us after failure?
Oh, I'll let you have that one, Kevin. I'll shoot after that.
Yeah,
That's a good question.
right. That is a good question. That is a good one. It makes me think about, are our failures really failures or just setups for something more?
Hmm.
And the reason I say this is because in his rage, that's a failure, right? But that's 1,000 Philistines down. And that was also strength that was given by God. In his failure of with Delilah, it was a setup for him to then be at the core of where everybody was at.
Hmm.
If he didn't go through that, if he didn't go through that failure, he wouldn't be at the core where they were all feasting and celebrating and and all that to then take down literally the core of the Philistines military. Right? You have all the leaders that are there, all the politicians. You kind of just you have to weigh all of them like where is the country or where is that
Hmm.
really going? So it really makes you think about like are our failures really failures or just setups for something more. Once God anoints you and chooses you, he doesn't go back. Like you are his 100 sheep, and if you're that one lost sheep,
Hmm.
he's always will bring you back. And God will never leave us stranded. And he will never leave us stranded.
Hmm.
So
That's the reason why they call Jesus Rabbi, right?
yeah, the reason why he calls him rabbi and the shepherd.
Yeah, and the shepherd. So
Sometimes we're that sheep, right? That
that
goes.
lost sheep.
Stanson was that lost sheep, but God came right back to him
Mm.
during that calling moment.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I do think God, even through our failure, has a purpose, and when He sees that we succumb to temptation, He's He's so kind to us and so loving that He will, even through the destructive path that we take, He will pave something beautiful for us to not only get out, but also to kind of like learn on how to create that pave ourselves, because he's like teaching us like, okay, yes, you got in there, you got into that hole, and I'm going to teach you how to get out of the hole. So now when you come out of the hole, your arms are strong, your legs are stronger. You now you have a savviness on how to get out of a hole, and now because you've been through the experience, you can actually teach others on how to not succumb to that.
Mm,
So I do think that God is so good that he, when we decide bad, he's he could put some good in it.
yeah.
And I do think that is something that we need to definitely glorify God for, because not only that Jesus Christ died on the cross for us, and you see Samson dying for his people. Right now, the Israelites are free from the Philistines.
Mhm.
Right, and that's the whole point. The sacrifice that we have to make for the better good for our own people, our own community. I do think that we're called to sacrifice for God to do the better good.
And that might be like the little to reverse it back into the beginning of stepping into the faith and how Samson was that
The
door.
Nazareth,
Yeah, and he was a doorway in. There's there's a thing when you step into Christianity, when you step into Catholicism, or whichever branch, when you follow Jesus, there is a thing. You're gonna make sacrifices.
yes,
And
and those sacrifices could be seen as, oh, you're being conservative, you're being too religious, and it's not about the religion. It's about the relationship. It's like when you commit to a girlfriend or a wife. It's like you're not gonna go out there cheating, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so it's like you have a new set of rules to honor yourself and honor the other person. And we have to think about that too. It's like, how do we honor God in our relationship with him? Because we can choose to be Samson at the beginning, right? Being anointed, being strong, and having all these great qualities. But then we can also choose to be the Samson that was vulnerable, but that had a purpose and understood the purpose of God in him. Which one is stronger? The ending of Samson or the beginning of Samson? Where do you think he was the strongest?
The strongest, I think, at the end when he saw the most clearest. When he was born again.
Well, he said he was blind. He said, I can see, I
Yeah.
can finally see, he said. When I read that, I get so sad,
Mm,
because he's not he's not lamenting. He's accepting and owning responsibility for his mistake, but also he's seeing God's strength as not his own, manifested in him. And and to me, it's like, man, I get sensitive, because you have to be very strong to admit that you're blind, that
mhm.
you can't see. And if you want to see further, you need God by your side.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like he freaked out about being blind either. Like,
That's a good point.
yeah, we read somebody who was blinded by God before too, but then his vision was also.
Paul,
Yeah, it's Paul. Paul. Yes. He was blinded. Excuse me. One second. Go ahead, take your time. Yeah, Paul was blinded by God, and next thing you know, God gave him his vision back. So with Samson being blinded, he fully accepted it, and Paul freaked out. But Samson's acceptance was because he knew that this was somewhat of a punishment for his own disobedience. This was Samson taking accountability. through his blindness.
J-
And when he went to go see God again, he knew that God was his full grace.
Yeah, and I agree with you, man. Like I think that Samson realized that like his real strength was God. He finally understood that his power, his strength didn't really matter if God wasn't with him.
Mm-hmm.
Like when God was with him, this is where it was like he can be vulnerable and still be strong and feel strong. At the other end, he could have been strong, but he couldn't lay out his vulnerability because everyone would be like a vulture and try to feed him up. But then when he's in the jail, he was okay with being vulnerable. He was okay with letting go. He was okay with, you know, something. I'm okay because I'm protected. Even if I'm captured by my enemies, I feel protected because I feel the presence of God. And I think that's the same thing that probably Paul felt. Like Paul probably reflected just like Samson, man, I made a mistake. I was going after God himself. And then, you know, in those that moment of blindness is like being in the desert. You're isolated.
Yeah.
You know, and the reflection and acceptance that you made a mistake, and then God comes and it's like, it's okay. You're gonna recover your sight. But now you have a real purpose, just like Samson had a purpose of the Philistine, Paul had a purpose of the uh, sending the message to Gentiles.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Even when you're in those places of like those vulnerable places and you are connected and protected with God, it shows. Like with David too, being in the prison and then comes out, like managing the prison.
Oh,
And
Joseph, yeah,
Joseph, sorry, not David, Joseph.
yeah,
Yeah.
Joseph. Like, and that this, what the Bible is teaching us is like I said, like, I don't know if you heard this, but to me, the Bible is like the conscience of God, and it's
Mm.
also telling us, like, read my story so you can understand when these behaviors happen to you. Remember my story. You know, reflect on my consciousness because I'm teaching you to make minimal mistakes so you can be closer to me. If you're closer to me, I can be there to aid you faster,
Yeah.
quicker, efficiently because you're choosing that. You know, you choose to be next to me because I'm next to you every single day. Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. Literally, literally, he's like he's the help.
yeah,
He's the glorified saying, "I'm gonna also lift you guys up."
yeah.
More like if you have the other gods that more like if you don't follow through, then they just kick you.
Mm,
All right, but Jesus is so merciful with us.
yeah,
God is very merciful with us.
yeah. And well, we normally always select the next episode. So I think it's my turn. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to choose in the same book of Judges, Gideon. And I think you're going to like Gideon.
Mm.
Gideon is a very interesting character. Uh, and what I like about him, he's all the contrary of Samson.
Mm. Okay.
He's all the contrary of Samson, right? And you'll love him because the angel of God with Gideon have this like funny, I would say, interaction, and Gideon is always asking for signs.
Mm.
So, also, those that are tuning in, if you have anyone that you wish that we could, you know, talk about in our podcast, the Walk Ethics Go podcast, let us know. Send a suggestion. If you have a prophet that you like from the Bible or it's something about Jesus Christ, Paul, any of the apostles, you know, just write to us. Also, if you wish to be part of this wonderful journey that we do, the walk with Jesus Christ, let us know. You know, we would love to have you as a guest. So leave your comments. Don't be shy. Leave a comment down there. Let us know if you want to be part of the podcast. Kevin and I will, man, we will embrace you, and we will definitely love to have an extra person on the couch. And the couch is comfortable too. So, so what do you think, Kevin? Gideon?
Gideon, let's do it. I don't know too much.
Oh, you're
I'll do
gonna
my
love Gideon.
research.
You're gonna love Gideon, bro.
Yeah.
You're gonna like Gideon a lot. So we're gonna watch. We're gonna talk about Gideon next week, God permits. And thank you guys for being with us. Instagram, you guys were great. The questions were great. YouTube, good job viewing us. Like I said, any question, any suggestions you have, please let us know. But in our next episode is going to be about Gideon. We will be posting polls this week. So stay tuned for that one. And also, hopefully, this episode will be probably posted next week. So that's one thing we got to discuss. Should we post them every Thursday?
Every Thursday, yeah, the walk Thursdays.
Yeah. So we'll post them on Thursday, although we record them on Tuesday.
Yeah,
So
Tuesdays for
yeah,
we stick to the T's.
yeah, we stick to the team. And I don't know, Kevin. What are your final words?
Remember, you don't have to be perfect to approach the faith. I have discovered that myself, and through my own experience, I thought I had to be perfect in order to go through. And God has my back, like God chose us, right? He chose us. Like that's all we need. That's all you need, right? So
Yeah.
he's calling to you, answer the call. And if we fall, or it's more like when we fall, because we're human, when we fall, always turn back to God. God is our ultimate strength. And God was ultimately Samson's strength, the strongest man in the Bible.
Hmm. Even the strongest man can be to succumb to temptation. When you have Christ in your heart, remember that His grace overcomes any sin, and that is what's going to free us from the Delilahs, the snakes, the apples, all these different metaphors in the Bible. That tells us that temptation is always lurking around. Temptation is there to make us fall. The devil's there to make us fall. We fall ourselves because we believe our convictions, our morals, our ethics are going to be above others. But we have to look into the Word of God and understand what mercy and grace means, and understand that the sin has already been paid off for us. We don't own anything to anyone because Christ already paid the price for that. Now we have to build that relationship with Jesus in order for us to have this wonderful walk. And although we're gonna go through tribulation, we're gonna fall, like Kevin was saying, it's not about how perfect you are or that you have to almost create like your own sanctification or others to sanctify you. Nothing is saint more than the Lord Jesus Christ. What we can do is always in our imperfections find the Lord, find His love, and build that connection and relationship with Him and trust Him. And even when we fall and we lose faith, it's always getting back on your feet and rectifying. Because I think that's what Jesus wants us to do. It's like there's a saying in the Bible. It's like, how many times do you need to forgive? And He says you got to forgive 7 times.
For the
Seven.
righteous man,
Ex-
sin 7 times, and just the righteous man is sin 7 times a
Times.
day.
Yes.
Like, imagine that. Like,
So he puts this whole thing. It's like you can be righteous man and still sin so many times. Like he exposes our vulnerability, but being next to Him and understanding that our walk with Jesus is going to be hard. It's just that we know we're going to be okay at the end. And that's what matters the most.
it's probably only hard because you only become more conscious.
Yes, indeed. As you walk with the Lord, right? You will become more conscious of what's good and bad, right? So
Mhm.
thank you for being with us. We will,
I'm
thank,
sorry.
thank you for being with us. We will be here next week, God permits, and we will talk about Gideon. And hopefully you guys have questions even before we even have the show. So hit us up. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thank you for being here with us. We will see you next week.
Exist. I'm trying to coexist. Exist. Yeah, I'm trying to coexist. Exist. I'm trying to coexist.